welcome to Season 2, Episode 42 of Pro Wrestling's Top 50. I'm your host, Travis McNeil, and today we continue our countdown of the top 50 matches in Impact Wrestling history with match number 9 on our list, which is a pretty famous match. It is the 6 Sides of Steel losing team must split up match between America's Most Wanted of Chris Harris and James Storm and Triple X of Christopher Daniels and Elix Skipper from the TNA Turning Point 2004 event held on December the 5th of 2004. Obviously these two teams had a pretty famous in its own right steel cage match. It was the first steel cage match ever in TNA history. It was a video earlier on this countdown. This was the big rematch. So both of these teams feuded throughout 2003. They would be separated and kind of cool off as both teams would go into their own kind of separate things. They would come back together in the summer of 2004, which I discussed a little bit in the 6 Sides of Steel cage match video between America's Most Wanted and the Naturals. So they almost kind of did a mutual respect thing, between these teams. We did some kind of cross-partner stuff for a little while where they would team with each other's partners. It led to things blowing up, and it led to a match on Victory Road, which was TNA's kind of first, big pay-per-view in November of 2004. So this was the big event. They decided to highlight these tag teams. They had a last team standing match that wasn't very good. I don't know what happened. It was weirdly structured. It fell apart. It just was not good. It was really disappointing because I think, everybody was really excited to see these two teams clash once again in a big time stipulation match. Fast forward a month though, we go to Turning Point where these guys are going to compete in a rematch of their cage match, but this time it would be the 6 Sides of Steel as TNA was now using the 6-sided ring, and it would also add on that stipulation of the losing team would never be able to team again. So big stakes when coming into this pay-per-view, but this ended up being the main event, which I don't think was announced ahead of time. So when it got that main event spot, I think everybody knew that it was going to be something special, and it absolutely was. This is a weird comparison that some people might criticize, but that early TNA Impact Zone in Orlando crowd really, to me, I think is kind of the closest thing we had to the ECW Arena crowd in the 90s. And weird statement because those crowds are very, very different at their core, right? The ECW crowd, with the smart crowd, right? They were hard on the wrestlers and everything like that traditionally. Whereas the Impact crowd, I remember back in the early 2000s, they'd get a lot of shade on the internet for their wacky chants and their dances and their things that they would do. People kind of called them geeks, and whatnot. But the reason why I make this comparison is both of those crowds, when they were given something and, I don't want to say told to like it, like they weren't, spoon-fed it, because, oftentimes, the ECW crowd especially would kind of revolt against things that they didn't like. But, when they were given something that was good, and basically told like, hey, this is good, enjoy it. Both of those crowds, I think, are some of the all-time best, just hot crowds that were so receptive to things and made everything seem better just because they were in front of those audiences. And this match, to me, is maybe the peak of that crowd for TNA, even though it was kind of early on and, their stay in the Impact Zone. When you have a crowd, and this actually, little trivia fact, this pay-per-view was the first time I ever heard a "This is awesome" chant. So I don't ever, I'm pretty well versed in my wrestling history, so I don't remember ever hearing it prior to the Chris Sabin versus P.D. Williams match earlier on this show, which is a great match too, well worth checking out. So we got that, back in this match, and there was a chant of best match ever. Which again, you didn't really hear stuff like that at the time, but just this crowd was just coming unglued for everything that they were seeing, and it elevated it, and it made it so much better. So my hat goes off to anybody that was in the Impact Zone on this night in December of 2004. The match itself, though, it borrows a little bit from their initial cage match. It does twists on it. It's all really, really good. It's horrifically bloody. It's got big spots, which we'll get to. They start really aggressively, and something that I really liked is they bring in the blood early, which they did in their initial cage match. But in the initial cage match, it was AMW that bled right away, which is normally kind of, what you see, right? The baby faces, they get that heat from bleeding. They came hot out of the gates, though, and they busted Chris Daniels open super, super early. So again, just that twist of, well, now it's the heels that are bleeding first this time. We get, so the handcuffs are a signature kind of AMW thing. I talked about that in the Final Resolution 2005 video just the other day. So X uses the handcuffs themselves. They handcuff Chris Harris to the cage, they bust him open, and then we get back to the numbers game. So you might remember when I talked about their original steel cage match, I talked about the story of their feud was that numbers game, where X was a three-man team. They also had low-key as part of their unit. They would constantly use those numbers to the advantage, and that built into the finish of their original cage match. So they bring it back here. Again, it's a steel cage match. How did they get the numbers advantage? Well, they handcuffed one of their opponents so that he's out of the way. They beat him down, they bloody him, and they go to work on James Storm. James Storm is so good. I've talked about this over and over again. He bleeds buckets. He draws great sympathy. And they did a really fun take on a hot tag here where, again, it's cage match. Everybody's in the cage. There's not really much of a tag structure. But Storm hit a big clothesline that sent both of his opponents down. Christopher Daniels had been wearing the key to the handcuffs around his neck and taunting Chris Harris with it. So when Storm hits this big clothesline, the key actually flies off of Daniels' neck. It allows Storm to get over to it and throw it to Harris to allow him to unhandcuff himself and come in as a house of fire as though he was coming in off the hot tag. So really cool, little different fun twist on what you would normally see for a hot tag. X, they managed to come back and things, AMW again, so good with blood. They sell the blood loss where, they kind of just run out of steam after that hot offensive run. X takes back over and just tons of disrespect. It's something that they've done in the past. Again, if callbacks to, for matches as callbacks and callbacks to my previous videos in this video. So you might remember the X versus Jerry Lynn and Amazing Red video I did. I talked about how they cost themselves the win by going for the death sentence, America's Most Wanted's finishing move. They do that here. They hit it successfully, but it only gets them 2. We go into big time moves. James Storm hits a super bomb to Elix Skipper from the top when he's trying to climb the cage. Again, that was a move that they did back in their initial cage match, so we'll call back to that. And then we get 100%, I don't know if it will ever be topped, the absolute craziest spot in pro wrestling history, bar none. And that is, and you've probably seen this. If you haven't, I don't know how you've never seen this. You have to see it. Elix Skipper would do a move where he would walk along the top rope, kind of like Undertaker or Grand Nanawa-esque, and he would hit a Hurricane Rana to an opponent that was seated on the top rope. Very cool spot. Elix Skipper does this move on the top of the cage. The balance it takes for this, slippery, sweaty man that's been rolling around another guy's blood for, 15 minutes to not fall is unbelievable. It's terrifying. Watching it now, knowing that he pulls off the spot successfully, my stomach churns because he slips a couple times as he's trying to stand himself up on the top of the cage. It is nuts. It is just like a pipe about that thick that he walks along. It's not like the WWE where it's kind of like a truss on top of the cage. It is just absolutely crazy. The man is an absolute nutcase for attempting it. He hits this, Hurricane Rana off the top of the cage, which is crazy enough, but you add in the walk along the top of the cage. He hits that, and the crowd they lose their minds. Every viewer that watched this match as it happened, we all lost our minds. There's no doubt about it. I almost feel bad because Christopher Daniels follows that up with a flying elbow drop off the top of the cage. That is also a completely psychotic spot, but it almost kind of gets lost in the shuffle because the crowd is still, losing their mind about what they just saw Skipper do. And that hadn't really sank in yet. So, in hindsight, maybe they should have waited a little bit, for Daniels to take this huge risk and not get the reaction that he really deserved for it. But yeah, he hits the big elbow off there. They still go hard with the spots. Again, Tower of Doom talked about it in AMW videos before. It was a big move at the time. They hit that, but like an escalated or an elevated, I should say, Tower Doom, where Christopher Daniels is like dangling off the top of the cage. So he gets superplexed, very much like Hulk Hogan to Big Boss Man at Saturday Night's Main Event. So he gets superplexed off the top of the cage while, you know, there's the power bomb and the electric chair and all of that Tower of Doom stuff in there. It was crazy, big crash to the mat. And it leads us into our finish, where again, the numbers game, they come back once again, just like they originally did in the original cage match, to bite Triple X in the bottoms, where the handcuffs that they'd introduced into the match get used against them. Christopher Daniels gets handcuffed to the cage and is left to watch as his team is disbanded. James Storm tells Chris Harris to go up to the top of the cage. You know, the death sentence was off the cage, was the finish of the first match. Again, just absolutely nutty spot. Chris Harris, though, says no, he doesn't want to do the death sentence off the top of the cage. They decide to really, you know, twist that knife that's stuck in Triple X. Triple X had been using the death sentence, right, you know, throughout the past couple of years as that, you know, that shot to AMW, and they put Elix Skipper away with Triple X's own finishing move, the Powerplex. The finish itself made perfect sense in the story. It was a very, you know, poetic, you know, sound finish. Was it anticlimactic? A little bit, though, yes. After all of the spots that you had already seen and that they teased the death sentence off the cage, I think everybody expected that big kind of grand finale finish, and then just for it to end with like a basic tag team move, you know, maybe not the best. But that said, like I said, it made perfect sense in the story, and it was a great, you know, cap to finish this legendary feud between these two legendary teams in an absolutely legendary match. This match is absolutely incredible. It's borderline, it shocked me that it only hit number 9 on this list. I expected it to be close to the top, to be quite honest. And that's not a knock on this match. It's absolutely phenomenal. But just the quality of some of the stuff that we have coming down the pipeline over the next couple of days is just, it's unbelievable. This match, though, if you've never seen it, you absolutely have to. You owe it to yourself, not just for the Elix Skipper, you know, cage walk Rana, but for the rest of the match. It's so good. It's filled with story, filled with blood, filled with big spots, filled with a molten hot crowd, one of my favorite crowds of all time. You need to see it. It's available on Impact Plus, of course. You can subscribe to my channel here on YouTube so that you never miss a video. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Wrestling50, and you can please join me again tomorrow as we continue to count down Pro Wrestling's Top 50. Top 50.